Hi, this is Dan Lynch. Join me and Jonathan Bennett for FLOSS Weekly, where we'll be talking all things VoIP and internet telephony. Our guest this time is Fred Posner from Kamailio, an open source SIP server that can help you manage all of your VoIP needs. That's coming up next on FLOSS Weekly, so stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is FLOSS Weekly with Dan Lynch and Jonathan Bennett, episode 551, recorded October 16th, 2019. Kamailio. This episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Melissa. Bad data happens to good companies. That's why 10,000 businesses count on Melissa for clean, reliable address data. Get started today with 25,000 records, clean for free at melissa.com/twit. And also by Command Line Heroes, the original podcast from Red Hat. It's back for its third season, and this time it's all about the epic history of programming languages. Episode 8 is all about C, the language that made so many others possible. Go to redhat.com/heroes or listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It's time for FLOSS Weekly, the show about free, libre, open source software. I am your host, Dan Lynch. I'm sitting in this week for Randall Schwartz, who is currently traveling for conference-related things, I believe. But I'm pleased to say that I'm not here on my own, which is good. I'm joined by Jonathan Bennett. Jonathan, how are you doing?
I'm great. It's good to be here with you again, Dan.
Yeah, it's good. We've done a few shows together now. We're getting a good kind of partnership going. It's good, isn't it? So I'm in my people will watching the video stream will be able to see from my kind of background. I'm in my usual location of Liverpool in the UK, in my little home studio. Jonathan, I think I can guess where you are, but where are you talking to us from?
Yep, I'm still here in the home office in middle of Oklahoma, one of the flyover states. So wave as you go by, everybody.
Excellent. I've got to say, you look like you've got an incredibly comfortable chair there. I'm quite jealous. It looks like a very posh, comfy, like office chair.
It is. This was actually a hand-me-down from one of the businesses I work at. The guy had to get himself a new chair, and it was just sitting around. And one of the ladies was like, "Hey, you don't need a new chair, do you?" And I was like, "Yes, actually, I do. I will take that." Yoink.
Excellent. So we'll cover that on Chair Weekly next time, I imagine. Which should be good. It could be a spin-off. It could be a spin-off show. Excellent. All right. And so, we're going to be talking about VoIP and internet telephony today with our guest, which is going to be really interesting. We've got Fred Posner, who is, and I'm going to try and say this project name right. We'll talk to Fred in a minute and see whether I got it close, but I think it's Kamailio. And we'll find out more. I'll ask him. But have you had a look at Kamailio at all, Jonathan?
I've not looked at Kamailio itself, but let's see if I have enough cable to do this. I do have an interest in VoIP. I've got my VoIP phone running on an asterisk VM on my desk right now. And so the real question about this show is going to be, is Kamailio interesting enough and compelling enough yet that it's going to convince me to give up asterisk? And that's going to be the question I ask.
That's a great question then. So you're going to have lots of great questions about this. I've used asterisk a little bit, and I played a bit with FreePBX many moons ago, but it's not my strong suit. So I'm glad that we've got a VoIP expert on who can ask all those kind of questions. We've got the chat room buzzing away actually, and my mention of office chairs and so on has got people excited. Apparently they're suggesting this week in office furniture, so maybe we can suggest that to Leo and see how he feels about that one.
We'll get right on that.
Yeah, we'll get right on that. All right, then. So, so we'll speak to Fred in a minute and bring him on. But before we do that, I do need to thank one of our sponsors for today. Today's episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by the leader in address verification, Melissa. Every address is covered from Adelaide, Australia to Zipacada, Colombia, and everywhere in between. We all know there's nothing good about bad data. It costs money, hurts sales, and decreases customer satisfaction. If bad addresses, duplicate records, and bouncing emails are hurting your business, isn't it time to come clean with Melissa? Delta Faucet, Z1 Motorsports, and Car2Go use Melissa. You should too. Delta Faucet was able to improve their call center processes with global address auto-completion. Melissa was able to reduce the fraudulent e-commerce transactions for Z1 Motorsports by 90%. That's a lot. Melissa provides a full spectrum of data quality protection for your customer data. Verify postal addresses, mobile numbers, and email addresses. Update the addresses of customers who have moved and eliminate duplicate records. Gain additional customer insight into your data with Melissa's analytics. Easily build address verification and customer data validation into your custom applications using Melissa's API, CRM cloud connectors, and e-commerce plugins. Or upload your customer file for a quick data cleanse. Melissa is serious about securely managing your data. They continually undergo independent security audits to reinforce their commitment to data security, privacy, and compliance requirements. SOC 2, HIPAA, and GDPR compliant. Mailers spend about $20 billion annually in undeliverable mail. Don't lose customers or cash. Make every address count. Bad data happens to good companies. That's why 10,000 organizations worldwide trust Melissa to get their data clean and accurate. Get started today with 25,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. That's melissa.com/twit, or call 1-800-MELISSA to find out more. And we thank Melissa for their support of Floss Weekly. All right, and so with that out of the way, we should go ahead and bring on our guest, Fred Posner. Fred, are you there?
Hi, how are you?
We're good, thank you. Yeah, are you good?
I'm great. It's great to be here. I'm really excited.
Excellent. So where are you speaking to us from, Fred? Where are you based?
I'm based out of Gainesville, Florida, which is a little college town just in the north armpit area of Florida, as you'd call it, where the University of Florida is.
Excellent, excellent. And I mentioned for people on the video stream will be able to see that we both happen to be wearing T-shirts today that say Marvel on them. You seem to be a big comic book fan. I can see in the background there you've got all kinds of Spider-Man posters and stuff. And as a geek, I couldn't help but notice.
Yeah, there's a Spider-Man posters up on the wall, and huge one that's off camera. You know, Thanos, of course, and then Steve Rogers as Captain America, and of course his brother Fred Rogers, as I like to put it, and bourbon, because you have to have bourbon.
Excellent. All right, and so unfortunately we're not here to talk about comic books today, but we are here to talk about a fascinating project that you're involved with. And let me see if did I get the name right? I've got Kamailio. No, I didn't. Oh. You
didn't, but nobody does. It's one of my favorite ways to talk about the project is let's talk about how to call it. And there's not even a real consensus within the project. I say Kamailio. You'll hear Kamailio a lot, but we're a project that's worldwide, right? And so we have a lot of people with different languages. The word itself is Hawaiian, meaning to communicate, and Kamailio. And so, you know, I'll say Kamailio, and that's the way I'll choose to refer to it.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'll follow your pronunciation for today. So Kamailio. So tell us about Kamailio then. What is it, and how does it work?
All right. So Kamailio is an open source SIP server. So you guys both mentioned Asterisk, which is a great product and one that I use. I have it here. You know, when one of these servers on here. Kamailio though is how to say it. You use it in an enhancement of a PBX. So software such as Asterisk or FreeSwitch or SEMS Gateway or anything like that, Kamailio would generally sit in front of it. It's an open source SIP server, and it can deal with aspects of SIP. And the vast majority of VoIP is SIP based, and it allows you to scale up your, let's say, Asterisk or FreeSwitch instance to something of a carrier level and handling thousands of calls per second, things like that, compared to, you know, 1 or 2 calls per second.
So you'd use it for large deployments by the sound of it then?
You can use it for large deployments. A lot of times I'll use it as a replacement for what most people call an SBC, and use it as a security device or a SIP edge router, something that can really help with securing your instance. If you do run Asterisk or FreeSwitch and you allow the public internet to access it, you probably see every 10 or 15 minutes some sort of script kiddie attacking your server. Kamailio is really good at blocking that kind of attack against you, as well as more ability to handle within the SIP. So to protect your instance from SQL injection, which is a huge thing I'm seeing now, or even we had PHP injection for people running free PBX. It also can be used as a IPv6 to IPv4 gateway, or a TLS to UDP type of gateway. So there's a lot of aspects of Kamailio that can be deployed to not just carrier grade, but to just enhance your simple PBX as well.
And it sounds like you've got a ton of features, which we'll dig into in a bit. But I mean, you've touched on something there that maybe this reflects on me more than anything else, but I've struggled in the past sometimes with configuring things like asterisk and the security, particularly, as you say, can be a lot of these products, because you've got to be, at some point, they've got to talk to the wider internet, otherwise your call's not going to go anywhere. So you need to do that, and that means you need to do all the security stuff. So is that an important aspect of the project, making it easier for people to manage some of these tools?
When you look at SIP itself, I don't know if SIP will ever be easy. And I'm not trying to say that it's hard. It's just ridiculously complicated. And, in its nutshell, it works a little bit like HTTP. And so, you have, a connect and a trying and a OK and a 400 error if there's a client issue, a 500 error if there's a server issue, things like that. So in some aspects, it's very similar to protocols that you might use on a daily basis. In other aspects, there's so many intricacies. The RFC for it is just enormous that it can get very complicated, and dealing with SIP, you kind of tend to just focus on SIP and forget about some other things, and we become more specialized as people, I think. That being said, our default configurations are now trying to do, basic security protections from, your more common attacks, as well as SQL injection attacks and aspects like that. And we're trying to do our best to comment in our configuration files so that people can understand where to make some changes, especially for a security reason, as easily as possible, as well as more modules. Kamailio itself is a module-based software. So, you can just, insert a module to deal with. For example, one that's coming out in the new release that's being released today is a sec filter, or a security filter, which will make it even easier to protect your system.
One of the things I always hated about setting up SIP, particularly with asterisk, is you've got to open up your SIP TCP port, and then you've got to open up like 10,000 high-level UDP ports to guarantee that all that audio traffic is getting through. It sounds like Kamailio is designed to sit out at the border and get all of that traffic, but be able to handle it securely. Is that what it's doing?
It depends. A quick answer is yes, but at the same point, for example, here at where I am now, I keep Kamailio on a private IP, and I have all of everything forwarded to Kamailio, and then Kamailio then handles it internally. So it can handle in a private IP, and I've spent a lot of time configuring those aspects, only because, especially in the state side, and with, people being less able to get some public IPs and things like that, we want to make sure that it can work on private IP space. And so I do try to do a lot of private IP space just to make sure that everything's functioning behind NAT and then another NAT. And SIP and NAT are arch enemies. So the more NAT you can throw at it, the better you can be.
Yep. So what is the connection between Kamailio and, let's say, if we're running asterisk, what does the connection between those two look like? And how does it save all of that bandwidth that processing power versus just using Asterisk?
That's a fantastic question. All right, so first, let me talk about Asterisk, and I love Asterisk. Asterisk is a great product. We have AstriCon coming up next week, I guess. I'll be there. There's so Asterisk is a very one of the, if not the most popular open source telephony PBX software in the world. You also have FreeSwitch, which is an excellent open source telephony project as well. Other common deployments would use what people call FreePBX, or that's the name of it, so people call it that. FreePBX is a GUI-based software that sits on top of Asterisk. And then you have Fusion PBX, which is a GUI-based system for FreeSwitch. So what do those do? Well, the most fun that you usually have with Asterisk, and the first things that you do with it is you play you type in a code and you hear, whether it's screaming monkeys or you hear some sort of sound, or you record your own sound and you have your own voicemail, and something you do generally deals with sound. Okay, so that's the first main difference, is that Kamailio is just SIP, nothing dealing with media. So in that aspect, the media server aspect of Asterisk or the other PBX is not something that Kamailio handles. It can set up that communication, but it doesn't touch the media. And so that allows Kamailio to specialize in just that call setup, as well as functioning, dealing with SIP. So your phone registrations, whether you want to do geographical aspects, the call setups, failovers, anything dealing with the SIP aspect of the call is handled by Kamailio, whereas the media processing and maybe some lower end logic as to, okay, I have the call here, and now let me allow the person to press DTMF and get their passcode or something, or and listen to voicemail. Those things are handled by the PBX software. So Kamailio would sit in front of that server and basically, one, take a tremendous amount of load away from Asterisk. So if I'm handling your phone registrations per se, that's a lot of work that Asterisk now doesn't have to do. So when you have maybe 10 phones, not an issue. When you have 200 phones, you start to see a lot of traffic. And when you have like 2,000 phones, then it starts to get into a real true aspect of, okay, well, what am I going to do with Asterisk here? How can it handle all these registrations and handle them well? Where if you offset that, for example, to Kamailio, you can handle hundreds and thousands, and if not millions of registrations, and then handle it with let's say a few Asterisk boxes on the other end, and just have Asterisk handle the media and do things in that regard. So you can have for example, all your phones register to Kamailio, which does a really good high availability, and then you can have multiple Asterisks for high availability, so that you could go, okay, well, this one, box A is a little bit on high CPU, so let me switch some traffic to box B, or box A went down, let me switch there, or maybe make just conferencing or something that's very CPU intensive for Asterisk go in one aspect, maybe phone queues on a different Asterisk, and maybe just regular communication on a third.
And so between Kamailio and Asterisk, is it still talking SIP?
Yep, just SIP. So generally it's just SIP going there. There is Kamailio works hand in hand with a couple of RTP proxies. So you could run the two most common would be RTP engine and RTP proxy, and those can proxy the media. So which is really important, like we were talking about with NAT. So I could still have just one exposed IP and have all of my media still work, and then Kamailio can then branch that media out to the other servers just via a proxy. But yes, the SIP would it would only talk SIP to Asterisk. So in the Asterisk case, it would use either CHAN SIP or PJ SIP, CHAN PJ SIP, to communicate to Kamailio.
And so as you describe this, It almost sounds like a load balancer, or at least it has load balancing functionality.
Absolutely. So some of the great functionality of Kamailio is, one, it's a proxy server. So with it being a proxy server, it's inspecting all the traffic and then going from there. So with that, you get immediate security aspects as well as logic aspects for billing, or however you want to decide, a second step of security or administrative function with the proxy, as well as like we were talking about with NAT, some sort of method of having a one entry aspect to your network. It can handle SIP registrations. So for phones to register to a SIP device, Kamailio can handle that. It can handle location. So, which is the next step, let's say after registration is, hey, I want to send a call to this phone. Where is that phone? Kamailio will handle that. It can do load balancing. We have a special module called Dispatcher. And load balancing is probably one of the more common uses of Kamailio. And load balancing can also handle some of those aspects we were just talking about. Okay, let me send the conference calls to server A, the voicemail to server C, things like that, as well as weighted load balancing. And you could even get as far as now with some new features, load balancing based on latency, even, so that you could go, okay, well, this server is responding, with the lowest latency. Let me send the most calls there. One of the new fun facts is, or newer technologies is WebRTC. And so Kamailio does support WebSockets. So it can also act as a WebSocket to SIP gateway. So it can receive WebRTC connections and then turn those into SIP and send those to your Asterisk. So if you don't feel like setting up Asterisk with WebRTC or opening it up, firewall or security wise, you can send those to Kamailio instead, and then Kamailio could do that WebRTC to SIP kind of translation.
So if somebody wanted to set up a Skype replacement, there's support for that sort of thing.
Absolutely. It does do messaging, and, through that, in fact, we can do XMPP. There's an old tutorial on one of our sites with how to make your own Skype replacement using Kamailio, complete with, conversations as well as messaging.
All right. I'm going to ask you a question that gets into the technical weeds. I apologize to everyone that's not SIP geeks like apparently the two of us are. One of the things you can do with Asterisk in a VoIP phone is you can do direct connections where Asterisk handles the handoff, and then the actual audio data goes point to point straight. Does Kamailio have support for something like that, particularly if you're load balancing?
Yes, and in fact, it even has much better support for that. So one of the reasons why I love using Kamailio in addition to some of these PBXs is because you can really get into those weeds there. So you can decide, okay, I want this phone and this phone to be able to talk directly to each other and have just the media go from phone A to phone B and not be proxied anywhere. We call that a direct media in Asterisk, and you could just call it peer-to-peer. Is widely accepted as well. You can also determine that, I want these two phones to talk about it, but they are both behind NAT and they are behind different local NATs. So there's no way that these phones are going to be able to talk to each other because they both have different outside IPs and NATed IPs. So then I could decide, even though I want them to talk to each other, I don't want them, I can't have them do that because the audio would never make it. So let me proxy the media between those two. And you could also decide, even though I want these two to talk direct, this phone call needs to be recorded. So let me send it to this Asterisk and have that call recorded instead, and things like that. So yes, you can make determinations based on IP, based on your own type of business reason or local desire as to whether or not you want to enable those phones to communicate directly or through a proxy or the media server.
Does Kamailio support running a stun server as part of the Kamailio instance?
You can put a stun server on the same box. It won't hurt it. A lot of people do it, but it does not offer stun services itself. So much like it doesn't do the RTP relays, it supports RTP media software on the same box. And so you can do that. You can have a turn server, not a turn server, a stun server on the same box. It's just not part of Kamailio at that point.
And I've been told that we are using too much jargon. Apparently, can you define for us two things that we've talked about: DTMF and then stun server, just to bring everybody up to speed.
So, let's talk about DTMF. DTMF is if you are old like I am, or into old phone geekery. DTMF are the sounds that happen when you press a key on a touch tone type phone, and those sounds are interpreted by the media server and turned into digits. So if I press the number 1 on my telephone, the server understands that I pressed the number 1. There's many different ways of sending that, what we call DTMF tone, to the server. It could be sent via SIP info, or it could be sent according to RFC 2833 is the most common. It could also just use the sound. So there are different ways of doing that, but DTMF is what allows you to press 1 for English, press 2 for Spanish, or enter in your credit card number or things like that. And so that is what DTMF means. With stun, that's part of WebRTC. So there's the whole aspect there is you as a user of your web browser generally have no idea what your public IP is. And the best way to think about it is if you asked your mom or grandmother, hey, what is your public IP? And you're just going to get stared at, right? And so so we need a way to get this information without having to ask the question and even then defining what an IP is. So stun is a method of the IP of the web browser going out and saying, okay, what's my public IP, and receiving it and then attaching it to the to its messaging so that it identifies, okay, hey, you know what? I know this is my internal IP and this is what the stun server says my public IP is. So stun is just a way of asking what's my public IP.
Yep, it can be used in SIP connection as well, and it's useful for when one or both of those SIP endpoints are behind NAT, network address translation, and stun is one of the ways that they can try to tunnel through that to be able to make connections.
Now
go ahead.
On just SIP to SIP, you wouldn't need a stun with Kamailio, because Kamailio is really good at detecting the public IP and configuring that, determining whether or not the private IP is, and keeping those and doing translations to that. So if it's just SIP, then you wouldn't need a stun at all, which is great if you're using Kamailio or something based on Kamailio software. But yeah, for WebRTC, you would absolutely need the stun. And if you were using some other aspects, you might need stun and SIP. But with Kamailio, it can handle that, which is great.
Oh, interesting. So it doesn't have a stun server built into it, but it has the same functionality essentially so that you don't have to have one.
Right, because it detects where the it has full access to the operating system and can say, okay, well, I'm getting this from this IP, even though. So it can see where the connection is coming from. So it uses that to go, okay, well, here's where the connection's coming from. But even though the person's telling me that they're 192.168 something, I know that they're really, 1234. So let me send it there.
That sounds really, really useful. I mean, I've just been enjoying sitting here and listening to the SIP geeks, as Jonathan called you, talking about this. I've had some problems with stun in the past, and with you talked about NAT and SIP and all that sort of stuff, and I think we've all had problems with that. Certainly, I have anyway. In getting, as you say, when you're trying to get a user who maybe isn't technical or experienced in technical stuff, and you say to them, well, as you say, I need to know your IP address, or I need this port to be open, or this, that, and the other. It may just go in one ear and out the other. So, I mean, it's really handy that this can cut down on that kind of complexity a little bit.
Absolutely. And, I think maybe 20 years ago, I would have been one of these guys that, how do you not know what an IP is? And as I've gotten older, I think, I don't know if I've just become more patient or understanding or empathetic, but, it's up to us to figure out those questions. We're not going to, we're not going to train people how to get that information for them. There's no use there. And so, Kamailio just ends up getting that information for us on a SIP to SIP connection. And then on WebRTC, though, you do need a stun server generally. But it just goes in there and makes those connections and Bob's your uncle. It just works.
That is really, really useful. I mean, let's pause for a second there. There's a lot more stuff I want to ask you in a minute, Fred. Just for now, I want to take a moment to mention our sponsor, our second sponsor for this week. So we need to talk about Red Hat. So this episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by Command Line Heroes, which is an original podcast from Red Hat. Time-sharing operating systems were the holy grail in the 1960s computing world. People dreamed of how time-sharing would open up the world of computing. While time-sharing turned out to be a bit of a dead end, that quest led to Unix and C, the programming language that made so many others possible. Command Line Heroes is back for its third season, and it's all about programming languages. From Perl to JavaScript to Ruby and C, the podcast dives into the origin stories of some of the most prominent languages around. Big dreams can lead to groundbreaking technologies, and sometimes small teams are the best at achieving those dreams. On their season finale, episode 8, it recounts the history of C and how a team of 4 developers accomplished what huge teams couldn't. In the process, they paved the way for millions of others to enter the world of programming and forge their own path. Command Line Heroes, an original podcast from Red Hat, is all about people who transform tech from the command line up. To listen and subscribe, head over to the podcast platform of your choice or visit redhat.com/heroes. That's redhat.com/heroes. There you'll be able to find full episodes as well as bonus content, and you'll even be able to test your skills on the Command Line Bash arcade game. And we thank Red Hat Command Line Heroes for their support of Floss Weekly. I want to try that Command Line Bash arcade game and see whether that's any good. Maybe I'll do that after the show. I'll wait till after the show, don't worry, to do that. So all right, and so back into the SIP geekery then, or to be honest, on my end, probably not so much technical stuff as Jonathan can get into, but I am curious. We had a question from the chat room as we're talking here. We've got a ISC chat room buzzing along, and some time ago, Y guy or WI guy, I'm sorry, I don't know how you pronounce that. They were asking what kind of hardware do I need to run this project? So I'm assuming it can be run on many different platforms. What kind of thing would I need?
So it runs on any of the NICs platforms. So I know some people do run it on free PBS or free BSD, although I don't keep up with that enough to tell you how well it's working. And in the past, some people have, God bless them, run it on Solaris. Nothing against that. Any of your NICs flavors will work on it. So, Debian, CentOS, Red Hat, flavors, Ubuntu, anything that you would want in that aspect. I even put it on a Raspberry Pi to play with. In fact, if you're running it for the house, you would only need a Raspberry Pi because the hardware needed is so minimal because the software is written in C. It's, again, open source. That's why we're here, right? All under GPL. And so because of it being module based, you could just load what you need. So it works on a lot of embedded platforms as well. So you really don't need a ton of hardware at it at all. On a Raspberry Pi 3, I was able to do over 500 calls per second without any, I think it was running 1% CPU. So you can really hammer away at it. It's very powerful on minimal hardware, but any of your Nix flavors will run it.
Excellent. And I was going to ask about the Raspberry Pi because I noticed on your blog you were talking about why you love Kamailio so much. Kamailio. I'm going to get that right. I'm determined to get it right by the end of the show. Although, as you said, not everyone agrees, so maybe I'm now getting it wrong. I don't know. I'm confusing myself. Anyway, so I was looking at. You said you can run it on a Raspberry Pi. So do many people do that? Is it will run on that kind of low level hardware?
Absolutely. Many people do it. And we've had demos at it. I believe it was 5 years ago at Astracon. One of our community members, Peter Dunkley, had Kamailio running on a Raspberry Pi, and it was, I think, just a Raspberry Pi B back then. So maybe the second version, and it was running WebRTC. So it was running full video to SIP, all on a Raspberry Pi. I've put it on here just to do some load testing and aspects like that. And, basically the computers that I could throw at it couldn't do anything that would break it. Somebody just did a really good study of it and had, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of calls per second with media set up and everything, and has some benchmarks. So Raspberry Pi is actually, I don't know if I'd ever feel comfortable using it in production on a high volume, but for example, at a small business, I would absolutely use it in production. It could handle anything that you would on most small, medium offices would be able to fully handle this on a Raspberry Pi.
That's really good. That's really useful because, it also cuts down for people who want to cut down, say, their electricity usage and their carbon footprints and stuff. The Raspberry Pi uses only a little bit of power and you can keep it's quiet, it's easy to cool effectively and so on. So that is really useful. And it kind of leads into my next question, actually, because the Raspberry Pi is nice and portable. I'm not sure I'd want to walk around with one in my pocket because I'd need to have it plugged. Well, I suppose I could run it off a battery. Anyway, I'll figure that out myself. But you could walk around with one in my pocket so I could use this. But people are saying now that like the traditional phone, a lot of people don't use it as much as they used to, with all these other options we got now for IM and video calling and all these other things. So where do you think Kamailio will be used most in the future? Do you think VoIP is still popular outside of, say, business? I do. I've heard for the last 15 years that the phone is dead, and yet, the advancement in phone software is still extremely strong. So I think for personal communication in residences, I don't see a lot of landlines anymore. And I don't see a ton of VoIP being used for the home, except for people that really like doing things as we do. So I have Asterisk at the house as well. But I think you are seeing VoIP now come maybe a little bit full circle because people understand now, hey, if I want some private communications, this is a way to have some sort of privacy in my communications as well as to have private communication. And so I think you might see a resurgence there. In terms of business, it will never go away, of course. Every time I hear the phone is dead, I still cannot express to you how many phone calls there are every minute from people needing to call a help center or something like that. And as well as Kamailio using devices such as WebRTC to facilitate those kind of communications as we move into the next level of communication. I still think it has a really good part in that, in one, bridging new technologies to the old, as well as enabling, WebRTC to WebRTC and those type of communication among people and devices. Because as we get into IoT, there's a lot of neat things that SIP can go into there and helping devices communicate with us when there's problems or things like that.
Speaking of bridging old technologies to new. We actually had a question in the chat room before the show even started, just while we were talking about things. And Gray580 asked, he said, I wonder if it can support a PRI. And I think I know the answer to that, but I'll let you take it.
Well, Kamailio itself can't, so because it does not do anything other than SIP in those regards. Well, I mean, it does do some things other than SIP, but it definitely doesn't do PRI. But that would be a good thing for Asterisk or FreeSwitch, right? And then you could turn Asterisk into a PRI gateway very easily with a pretty cheap card. And then, either put Kamailio there to communicate it to the rest of the world, or just have Asterisk handle that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Can Kamailio run without a SIP server behind it? Does it have like a standalone version, or does there always have to be something like Asterisk powering it?
You would use Asterisk for media. So if you needed to, for example, play a message to someone, or handle voicemail, or do bridging of media for multiple headsets, like a conference. But if it's just peer-to-peer communication, no, you don't need anything other than Kamailio itself. So, for example, for like the Skype replacement, where you could just have, hey, here I am, let's talk, or let's have our phones just talk when I dial it, you wouldn't need anything other than Kamailio itself. And that could handle anything from, with soft phones, video chats, or like a FaceTime replacement, to, just voice, or with WebRTC, anything you'd want in those regards. Where you would need the media servers when you wanted to do something like record a call, or, play a message to someone, do codec transcoding, which is saying, okay, well, this phone only speaks this codec, and a codec is just, think of codec as a language. So the most commonly used around the world are ALAW and ULAW, and it could be, okay, well, this phone speaks ULAW, which let's call that English, and this browser speaks Opus, which is through WebRTC, and we could call that Spanish. And then, you would use Asterisk or FreeSwitch, or even RTP engine to transcode those two so that one can hear the other and understand it. So it would just be a translator between those two languages.
Do you have an idea of how many users of Kamailio there are around the world?
This came up to me when I was dealing with a FUD campaign, and which we all have, and they were saying, oh, there's not very many downloads of Kamailio anymore. And I went to Daniel, who's the project leader and the main author, and I said, hey, do you know how many downloads we have? And he goes, well, it's on GitHub and packages. It's open source. We don't keep track of these kind of statistics. We don't care how many people are, it's free for the world. And we looked, and so he did get some stats from GitHub, and I think we were on just the GitHub, I think there were like 40 or 70 individual downloads a day. And we were both kind of shocked that it was that high. Like, wow, that's a lot of people using Kamailio. It's well used with large enterprises and companies in, let's say, the Fortune 500 for sure, but even smaller, and bigger, let's say like the top 50 of the Fortune companies, they're using Kamailio. If you look at some of the companies that, like, if you were to do some job searches for Kamailio, you would see some very large publicly traded technology companies and communication companies that are also offering jobs for people that know Kamailio.
So speaking of which, what does the configuration and setup for Kamailio look like? We have things like FreePBX has a nice web interface that you can go through and do all that. And then you could just do it on Asterisk itself, and that's all, configuration files. Where does Kamailio fall?
So Kamailio falls by itself within the configuration file realm. And there's three different ways that you could do it. One is that there is a product called Ceramus from Acipto, which is Daniel's company, which does the Kamailio, and this is also an open source product called Ceramus, and Ceramus is a GUI for Kamailio, so you could use a GUI based version for Kamailio. There's the main configuration file, which is kamailio.cfg, and that is much like Asterisk, kind of written in its own scripting language, but it's very basic. So if you have a Perl background or a C background, or just can understand what an if statement is, it will kind of make sense to you, as well as something that came out a few years ago and is only getting stronger is Chemi, which is an embedded language interface for Kamailio. So especially with WebRTC, us realizing that your next, as a member of the community, Dan Jenkins said, your next phone developer is a web developer. So understanding that a lot of developers don't want to learn a config file. They know Python, they know Java, or they know Lua, and they want to just use their languages. You can use this Chemi interface and just write your config in that language.
And then let's dig into the licensing on this. You mentioned it's GPL.
Yes, sir.
Which version of GPL is it?
I think some of the older ones might still be V2, but the vast majority, I believe, is V3. So GPL 3.
So this kind of falls into the same realm as a web application. Did you guys think about like a GPL at all?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that, Kamailio started back in 2002 under OpenSARE, so it's been around for a long time. And so there are some aspects of the code that are difficult to switch to a different language or to a different licensing, as well as there are some requirements for playing well with some of the operating systems. So, for example, we in Debian, for the packaging and aspects like that, there are some reasons why licensing needs to be a certain way, and we do have packages for Debian as well as CentOS that will work straight out. And so the vast majority is just on the GPL based, and I think it was 3, but I can look it up. I mean, it's on GitHub, so you put it up in the background. Verify. It's been a while since I looked at the since I looked at the license. But most of it is just there. So I'll look that up in the background while we're talking.
Okay. So I do have one follow-up question before I hand it back off to Dan.
Sure.
I love with projects like this, I love asking this. What is the weirdest thing that people have used Kamailio for that you're aware of?
Like I said, we don't do media. And the weirdest thing I saw a few years ago was someone did a music on hold application for Kamailio, where it did music on hold and it handled media through software that doesn't touch media. And that was phenomenal. And now we're at the point where 5.3 just came out, and 5.3 has a media module. So we've kind of come almost full circle in a certain way on different aspects. So it's kind of fun with those aspects of it. I've used Kamailio myself as just with those, for example, load balancing. So load balancing, one of the aspects of load balancing is Kamailio as the dispatcher module will go out and check to see if that server is alive, right? So I'm not going to send traffic to a server that's dead or non-responsive. And so with that, I've used Kamailio as just a monitor for other PBXs. So, just a quick little service where it sends you a message when your phone system is no longer responsive. So you can use it as an uptime monitor and things like that.
Wow. It sounds so versatile. You can almost use it for anything. I'm not saying that's me saying that, by the way, not Fred saying that before he gets any. I tried to use this as a mail server, and it wasn't very good. Anyway, so that's not an official message from them. So it sounds fantastic. Really, really interesting. I mean, you mentioned that you're on GitHub, you're under GPL v3 for the most part, all that kind of stuff. So do you get a lot of contributions from the community? Do you take a lot of patches and so on?
We take patches from everyone. I'm not a programmer myself, so my contributions to the project have been mostly documentation, although I did do a bash update because we have an install script, and I made a change in there, and I'm like, oh yeah, look at me, I'm a contributor now. So I mean, we have over 30,000 contributions. We just passed that mark the other week, which is amazing. We accept them from the wide community, and they're evaluated by someone that has published access to the GitHub and tested with there. But we love the fact that there are a tremendous amount of people contributing the product since 2002 there. I forget how many contributors. It's over 100. I think we have almost 200 contributions since we switched to, or contributors since we switched to GitHub. And in looking at it, I do want to correct the vast majority of the licenses version 2 of GPL, and it with some of the newer ones using BSD licensing for some individual components that are under BSD license.
Yeah, I mean, these things are always complicated, and combinations of licenses. I mean, people should look and check is probably the best thing to say about it. People have a look and check before Brilliant. So unfortunately, we're kind of running towards the end of our time, Fred. Is there anything that's the end of the show, not the end of hopefully not the end of our time. But is there anything that we haven't mentioned or haven't brought up about Kamailio that you want people to know?
Sure, we're an open community. We believe strongly in open source, and we love working with other open source projects, as well as anyone from the community that just wants to learn and play. We have on Kamailio.org, we talk about the different ways that you can communicate with us. We have a very active mail list, as well as IRC chat, because that will never die. And then there's even a Slack room for people that would like to get help there. But we're one of a community where if you would like help, just ask, and we love to participate.
Excellent. That sounds good. And we didn't get a chance to talk about bread, because apparently you're a baker as well. You started a bakery. So maybe we'll get you back to talk about the bakery next time. But in the meantime, very quickly, if people want to check out that bakery, how do they do that?
Wow. Plug for the bakery. My wife started a bakery back in 2010. That's where I'm working out of, Bear Bake Shop. So BearBakeshop.com. BearBakeshop.com.
Excellent. So we'll go and check that out. So we do have we have a couple of, in fact, 3 final questions that we like to ask every guest. So the first one that we always ask every guest is, what is your favorite scripting language?
Perl.
And
I say that with my first interaction. There used to be an Asterisk users conference, and which turned into the VoIP users conference anyway. I wrote a Perl script, and the guest that week ended up being Merlin, so Randall was on it, and tore it up. Oh, did he destroy it? Oh, he just brutally destroyed it. And I learned more in 10 minutes than in the years I spent trying to get up to that point. It was fantastic. But Perl, by and far, Perl's my favorite language.
Perl, that will be a very popular answer. In fact, one of our questions was suggested by Randall. He's around. He's ghost hosting, I suppose, today. He's not he's not in the Ethernet. He is the Ethernet. He's kind of around. He's not in the jungle. He is the jungle. So yeah, a second question is text editor. What do you like to program in?
I try not to get into religious wars, but I'm Vim or die.
Well, you just lost those brownie points. Anyway, brilliant. And then finally, last question is, seeing as we have a lot of projects on this show that seem to link in some way to blockchain, is there any way we could link Kamailio to some kind of blockchain related thing?
There are people that are doing blockchain with SIP in terms of billing credits and aspects like that, and there's some discussion as to using that for identity. So when you're trying to prove who you're talking to, because that's a great conversation for next time. But how do you really trust that the endpoint is the endpoint that you think it is?
So that's interesting. So there really is.
Yeah.
Excellent. So there really is a blockchain one there. Well, that maybe is something to get into in the future. That's brilliant. Usually that's just a flippant question that people, we ask everyone that. But actually,
it's one I like to make fun of, but the people are actually trying to do it right. But that's one of my favorite blockchain.
Excellent. All right, Fred, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I get the impression we could talk for hours here, but unfortunately we only have a limited amount of time, so we'll have to speak to you again in the future. But thank you very much for coming on and telling us all about Kamailio, and we'll speak to you again.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to be here. Thank you.
No problem. So that was Fred Posner, who was talking to us about VoIP and telephony and so on in relation to Kamailio, which is a open source SIP solution, which is amazing. So, Jonathan, you seem to know a lot about SIP, and certainly a lot more than I know about it. So, what did you think?
I know of asterisk installations that I have that probably should have this set up in front of them. I have, when I was much younger admin, I've had an asterisk server actually get breached by someone guessing SIP passwords. And so very quickly learned my lesson about how to configure those a little bit better. But Kamailio sounds like a great solution to sit in front of it, so that just to take away a lot of the headache of configuring and working with asterisk. It sounds like a really cool project. It sounds like they are unintentionally, very, very slowly replacing the need for asterisk as well. He started out by saying that, oh no, we don't do anything with media. It's just this. And then by the end of the show, he told it, well, yeah, okay, so somebody wrote a module that can do this, and somebody wrote a module that can do that. And I don't know if this is actually feature creep, but it sounds like they're very, very slowly kind of expanding this area where you don't need anything else. You can just use Kamailio, and that's always interesting to watch.
It is, and it sounds like they've got a lot of contributors as well. So that will, contribute to this kind of growing of the software in different directions, which is really cool. And it's definitely something that I'll have a look at next time I have cause to kind of to deploy any kind of VoIP system, which I don't actually do a lot of, to be honest. But in the past, I have had a lot of those headaches over certain things that it sounds like this could really help with, and be really great for large deployments as well, by the sound of it.
Yeah, so that's one of the other things that's always a problem with asterisk is when you go to scale it up, particularly like if someone was trying to become a telephone operator in a town or a state. How do you handle that many users? And it sounds like that's a problem that these guys just have sorted. I'm really sad that we ran out of time. I would like to ask him about their funding model, whether there's a business around this, and we just ran out of time and didn't get to. So we'll have to have him back here before too long.
Yeah, and lots to talk about, as you say. So if you want to find out more, don't forget you can go to kamailio.org, which is their website, and you can find all about it there. And if you're wondering how to spell Kamailio, because you might well do, you can go to the Floss Weekly website and find out there. So if you enjoy Floss Weekly, which we hope you do, and you want to get involved, you can join us each week in the IRC chat room. We mentioned some questions that people passed to us this week in the chat room, and that runs during our live recordings. It's really easy. You can chat to the listeners, you can chat to us, you can put questions to the guests. If you just go to twit.tv/live, if I say it right, twit.tv/live, which is where you find the live stream for the live recording. There's a join chat button. You click that, hey presto, you join the chat, which is amazing. So that's really good. So you can do that. We tape Wednesday mornings, 9:30 a.m. usually, Leo time, West Coast time in the US. You can also follow us on Twitter if you like. You can go to at Floss Weekly, which is our Twitter handle, and find out stuff there. If you're a big fan of a certain open source project that you think you'd like to see on the show or like to hear about on the show that we haven't featured yet, or maybe hasn't been on for a long time, I don't know. We really want to hear about that. So you can get in touch with the project themselves is the best way to do it. It's the way Randall always pitches it. The best way to kind of do it and to get them way up the schedule there is if someone from the project can email Randall on mailin@stonehenge.com. And again, these details are on the twit.tv/floss page. You can get in touch with him, and then we'll sort all that there. So if you go to twit.tv/floss, you can find all the information there. And we do have on that page an upcoming guests spreadsheet, which Randall updates regularly and keeps on top of. So I've had a quick peek at it, and I can tell you that October the 23rd next week, we've got Gregory M. Kurtzner and Adam Hughes, who are coming on to talk about Singularity, which I had a quick look at, and it seems to be about containers, containerization, managing deployments and of your containers and all that kind of goodness, which is good. And then October the 30th, the following week, Ken Fallon and Kevin O'Brien from Hacker Public Radio are coming on, who are actually friends of mine. So hey guys, if they're watching or listening to this, they'll be back on, and they'll be talking about Hacker Public Radio, which is a really great podcast network that's been running for a long time, sharing all kinds of cool stuff, tips every day. And then finally, November the 6th, we've got Troy Maximov, who's going to talk about Hot Rock, which I'll be honest, I don't know a lot about. I had a quick look, and it looks interesting. But we'll find out more on the show. That's why I tune into the show, and hopefully why you do as well. And then we've got more guests coming throughout November, but I'll spare you the play-by-play breakdown there. You can go and have a look at the spreadsheet and find out more about that. All right, and I'm going to be quite busy this weekend because if you've heard the previous show about Og Camp, which is an event that I run, I'm going to be there running that this weekend. So if anyone's coming to Manchester in the UK this weekend, if you can make it there, come and say hello. If you listen to Floss, or even if you don't, I suppose, but you wouldn't hear it, would you? If you don't listen to Floss, you wouldn't hear this. So come and say hello. It's always good to catch up with you. And I know Ken Fallon's going to be there from Hacker Public Radio for at least one of the future guests. You could ask him some questions. All right, and Jonathan, where can people find out about what you're up to?
So you can follow me on Twitter at JP_Bennett, and we're still kind of in stealth mode, but we're a sneak peek for listeners of Floss Weekly that stick around till the end. I've actually set up a Patreon, patreon.com/JP_Bennett, and have some interesting things brewing there. Hopefully we can make some public announcements soon about that. But those are the two places that if people are interested, to take a look and see what I'm up to.
Excellent. Make sure you go and check that out then, people. All right, then. I think that's probably about the end of all the time that we've got for this week. So, Jonathan, thank you for joining me, and your SIP knowledge was definitely very much appreciated this week.
Oh yeah, it's a show I really enjoyed. This is something I do quite a bit, and always a pleasure, Dan, to come on and co-host with you.
Excellent. So we'll see you again soon. And with that, I think that's the end for today. So we'll see you again next time on Floss Weekly.